Hello and welcome back to our Nullitaire playthrough of Liberty or Death. And a reminder once again, Nullitaire here means we're playing with 0 players. In other words, we're playing all the bots against each other. We're coming close to the end of the game now. We just had a winter quarters round and there's only one winter quarters round left. So this is the last year of the war. So we're starting at the spring of 1780. Here's the shape of the board right now. Like I said, we just had a winter quarters round, so all factions are eligible. Right now, the difference between support and opposition. Support is still higher than opposition, but it's not nearly as big a gulf as it has been for most of the game. So who knows what'll happen in this last year. Their support did come down all the way down to 20 at one point and tied opposition, but the British have been able to push that back up a little bit. The Patriots are still winning when it comes to forts versus villages, and the French are winning when it comes to cumulative casualties. All right, well, let's continue into the spring of 1780 with the next card. The next card is French fleet arrives in the wrong spot. Oops. Okay, the French are first eligible. The event says coordination with the French is a challenge. Remove up to 4 French regulars from the map to available. Free battle anywhere with +2 force level. We see that musket under the French there, so we need to check their special instructions. It says, if possible, remove French regulars from spaces where rebels outnumber present British. Okay, the thing about this event is that the battle is not possible. The only French regulars on the map are there in New York City. There aren't even any French regulars in the West Indies. The rest are all available. And so a battle is not possible. A battle requires a space with French and Royalist pieces. Okay, so that means that all this event would do is remove 4 French regulars to available. That's all it would do. So thinking about the rule book 8.3.3, ineffective events. If an event, after any event instructions are taken into account, would have no effect at all, not even manipulating eligibility, or where the only effect would be to remove 1 or more friendly pieces without replacing them with other friendly pieces, or the event shifts the difference between support and opposition in favor of the enemy side, a non-player faction will consider it to be ineffective and choose a command and special activity instead. All right, so that means that the French will consider this to be an ineffective event. It doesn't do anything interesting, right? All it would do is move their own pieces off the map. That's no good. All right, so they're going to choose a command and special activity instead. French resources are greater than 0. They are at 10. The Treaty of Alliance has been played. A D6 less than the available French regulars. The answer is definitely yes. There are 10 regulars available, so no matter what the roll, it will be less. So the French are going to muster in one space with rebel control or the West Indies. If fewer than 4 French regulars are available and the West Indies is not rebel-controlled, muster in the West Indies. Well, there's more than 4 French regulars available. So the next point. Otherwise, muster first in a colony or city with continentals, then elsewhere. So they're going to want to pick a colony or city with continentals. And there are 3 such spaces. New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and New York City. So they will choose one of those randomly. They rolled a 6-3, which is Massachusetts. So French bot will spend 2 resources and place 4 regulars into Massachusetts. The French never consider using their muster command to place a fort for the Patriots. So that's all they can do. That's all they will do with their muster command. So carrying on to their special activity. They'd like to skirmish, but there are no spaces with French regulars and British pieces right now. So Préparer la guerre would be next, but there are no unavailable pieces and they're not at 0 resources, so they won't choose that either. Therefore, they go with naval pressure. They'll raise FNI 1 level and blockade a city. All the cities that are under British control right now are equal with respect to support. And they want to place their blockade at the most support. So they'll choose randomly from all of the cities that support, and they'll blockade that city. They rolled a 2-2, which is Philadelphia. So they will blockade Philadelphia. The next available faction can take the event or a limited command. And the next eligible faction is the Patriots. Once again, the event says remove up to 4 French regulars from the map to available, free battle anywhere with +2 force level. The Patriots also have that musket icon, so we'll have to take a look at their special instructions, which say remove no French regulars, select space per battle instructions, else ignore. Okay, so they would not remove any French pieces here. And it is optional, it just says remove up to. So it's an optional part of this event. So they wouldn't remove any French regulars. So all they would get out of this would be a free battle with a +2 to the force level. There are a few spaces they could choose for battle, because battle requires Patriot and Royalist pieces in the same space, and there are a few. But the battles would be pretty lopsided. The Patriots are not in a good position in any of those positions. In any case, if we look at the event or command box, they're not going to choose it. The first one, support is greater than opposition, and the event shifts support opposition rebel favor. You might think, well, maybe if they can battle and win the day, then they can shift support in their favor. Shift opposition in their favor anyway. But the rule book is very specific about this. It says in the rule book, more specifically, including by increasing the FNI, but not by free battles. Okay, so the Patriot bot doesn't consider that idea. All right, and the answer to all the other bullets there is no, including the last one, because the Patriots still don't have 25 or more pieces on the map. So they will continue on with their flowchart and look for a limited command instead. My apologies for any construction noise you might hear on the video. There's some construction going on nearby. They're hammering right now. It's a little annoying, but hopefully it won't be too distracting. Okay, Patriot resources greater than 0. Yes, they are at 19. Rebel cubes and lead are greater than active Royalist pieces in a space with both. No, there are some spaces with Patriot pieces and Royalist pieces, but there are no Rebel cubes there. All the Rebel cubes are away from the Royalists. Okay, so no to that. Raleigh would place a fort. Actually, yeah, it would. New York City could place a fort there, or it could also place a fort in Massachusetts because there is one available. It was removed from Massachusetts a while back. Okay, so Raleigh would place a fort, yes. All right, so first bullet point, place a fort in each space with 4 or more Patriot units and room, first in cities within that highest population. Well, okay, they'll choose New York City then first and place a fort there. Since this is a limited command, it's all they'll be able to do this turn. Okay, well, that's not entirely true. They could do more things in one space with Raleigh, but it's irrelevant in this case, right? If desired, replace any militia in one space containing 4 with Connells. Well, there aren't any militia in New York City, so that bit is irrelevant. Okay, that's the Patriots' turn. The next card is the Gamecock, Thomas Sumter. The Indians are first eligible. Their half of the event says British pressure the Gamecock. Shift South Carolina or Georgia 2 levels toward active support. And we also see the Indians have the musket icon. But it's worth noting right away that this event is ineffective. Both Georgia and South Carolina are already as far as they can go to active support. But just for the sake of completeness, let's just see what it says for the Indian player. It just says first in non-village spaces. All right. Well, this is an ineffective event, so they won't consider it. They'll carry on with their flowchart. Support plus a d6 greater than opposition. Yes, support is greater than opposition. Gather would place 2 or more villages. No, it wouldn't place any villages right now. Or a d6 is less than the available war parties. Well, there are 5 available war parties, so they had to roll on that, and they rolled a 6. So the answer is no. A space has war party and British regulars. No, that's not the case. Okay, so the Indians would like to march. With underground and active war parties, without moving last war parties from any village, moving last 3 war parties where gather can place a village, or adding any rebel control. So once again, I will mark all the pieces that can move, and then we'll see where they go. I've now marked all the pieces that can move. Let's see where they want to go. If 1 or more villages are available, and there are, march to get 3 or more war parties in 1 additional neutral or passive space with room for a village. Well, this lonely war party down in Florida can't move to accomplish that. Neither can the one in the southwest. So it's up to these war parties in the north. The only place they could move that's neutral or passive and has room for a village that's adjacent is Maryland, Delaware. So all 5 of those war parties will move into Maryland, Delaware. And this will cost the Indians 1 resource. The next priority, because that just says in 1 space, so they've done that. The next priority is to remove most rebel control, first where no active support. Well, the only movable war parties now are Southwest and Florida, and there's no place where they could remove any rebel control. So that's the end of the priorities for Indian Bot. Therefore, they're going to move on to their special activity. They would like to warpath, and they do have some resources, so they will do this instead of trading if they can. So warpath, first to remove a patriot fort, then most rebel pieces within that first inner province with 1 or more village, then elsewhere. Well, warpath requires a space with an underground war party and rebellion pieces. And there's only 1 such space, and that's the northwest. And their priorities say to remove the most rebel pieces, so they're going to try to get rid of that 1. So the first part of the procedure comes into play. Activate 1 underground war party and remove 1 rebellion unit. So Indian Bot will use warpath, activate their 1 war party in northwest, and remove that militia. The British are next eligible, and they can take the event or a limited command. And as we said, the event is ineffective. It says shift South Carolina or Georgia 2 levels towards support, toward active support, but they're both already at active support, so they're not going to take that. So they're going to look for a limited command instead. British resources greater than 0, yes, they are at 12. 10 or more British regulars on the map. No, there's only 8 on the map right now. So no. Available British regulars greater than a d6. Well, definitely. There's something like, 16 British regulars up there. So yes, they're going to muster for their limited command. So place regulars, first in neutral or passive, within that first to add British control, then where Tories are the only British units, then elsewhere within each first in highest population. It turns out that there are no cities or colonies that are not at active, either opposition or support, except for 2, just Pennsylvania and Maryland, Delaware. Every other city and colony is active. Okay. So here's the thing. They prioritize a neutral or passive space for placing their regulars. So they would choose one of those 2 spaces, right? Well, no, because the only city adjacent to those spaces is Philadelphia, and it's blockaded. Philadelphia, by the way, is also at active support. It's just hiding under that blockade to remind me that's not being counted for total support right now. So they actually can't get to either of those to place any regulars. But they still can choose a neutral or passive space because muster, location, regulars in any 1 city that's not blockaded or an adjacent colony, or the West Indies. So they can put their regulars in the West Indies. That's neutral. So that's the only neutral space, neutral or passive space, where they can actually place their regulars. So that's where they're going to do their limited command. They're going to muster in the West Indies. So the British take control of the West Indies once again. Because this is a limited command, that's the only space they can choose, and they can't put any Tories in the West Indies because that's illegal. They don't have any forts available, so they couldn't put any fort in there. And they can't reward loyalty in the West Indies because the West Indies is always neutral. So that's all they can do for their limited command this turn. The next card is Thomas Brown and the King's Rangers. The Patriots are first eligible, and their side of the event says, Sons of Liberty rally against. Patriots place 2 militia in South Carolina or Georgia and may partisans there. Okay, well, the Patriots definitely want to take this. You look at the second bullet point of their event or command box. Event places underground militia in at least one active support or village base with none. And this event would do that. It places 2 militia in either South Carolina or Georgia, both of which are at active support. So it would place underground militia in those spaces. And now the question here doesn't give us a priority for selecting which of these 2 spaces the Patriots will pick. But I think the general rule for events, 5.1.3, an executed events text that can be an executed events text that can be implemented must be. If not all of its text can be carried out, implement that which can. I think that makes the selection. It's got to be South Carolina, which is what the Patriots would want to do anyway. Because if they choose Georgia, then they won't be able to partisans there. Partisans can only be in a space that has underground militia and royalist pieces. So placing those underground militia in South Carolina will allow that partisans to take place. So the Patriots are going to take the event. They'll place 2 underground militia in South Carolina, and then they will partisans. And with partisans, if we look at their instructions for partisans, partisan is in a space with underground militia and enemy, first to remove a village, well, that's not relevant. Then to remove most war parties, that's not relevant. Then British. Within each, first to add most rebel control, then to remove most British control, then elsewhere. All right, so they're going to try to remove the most British. In this case, all they can do is take away 1 Tory. So activate 1 underground militia and remove 1 royalist unit. So that's what they're going to do. They'll activate 1 of those militia and remove that Tory, which will give them control of South Carolina. So the Patriots have finally made some inroads in the South. That Tory went to casualties, by the way, which pushes cumulative casualties up to 24. Cumulative British casualties, that is, up to 24. All right, the French are next eligible, and they can take a full command of special activity. So we worked down the French bot flow chart. French resources greater than 0, yes, they were at 8. The Treaty of Alliance has been played. A D6 is less than the available French regulars. Well, there are 6 available French regulars, so the only roll that would answer that question in the negative is a 6. So what do you think they rolled? Yeah, just take a guess. What do you think? If you said 6, you're right. They rolled a 6. All right, so the answer is no. Rebel cubes and leader exceed British pieces in a space with both. Nah, there aren't any spaces with rebel cubes and British right now. So the French want to march. Their only requirement is that they lose no rebel control, so I will mark all the pieces that can move according to that restriction. So all the French regulars on the map can move, and they can take all the Continentals along with them that are in the same space. Curiously, that would abandon the fort. If all those pieces move out of there, that would abandon the fort in New York City. But, French bot just says lose no control, and that fort's enough by itself to maintain control. So I guess the French just don't care about that. And those pieces in Massachusetts can also move. Okay, so let's take a look. Within that, march with as many French regulars and Continentals as possible to add rebel control, first in cities, then colonies, within each first 2 spaces with most British pieces. Okay, so they want to take control of a city if they can. Well, all those pieces in New York are already in a city. So the choice is obvious here. They're going to move those regulars and continentals from Massachusetts into Boston and take control of that space. Both the French and the Patriots have to pay a resource for that. Now, there's still some movable pieces, so let's see if they want to move those. So we're still on the second bullet point. March with as many French regulars and continentals as possible to add rebel control. First in cities. Okay, there are no more cities that we can choose. And that should say then colonies, but that's missing. Within each first to spaces with most British pieces. Okay, well, they could move from New York City to New York Colony, and there is a British piece there. That wouldn't add control to it. And they want to add control, so they'll have to move to New Jersey. There's only two spaces they could move to, New York Colony and New Jersey, and the only one that they would actually add control to is New Jersey. So they'll move there. That also costs both the Patriots and the French one resource. There are no more movable French regulars on the map, so that's the end of March for the French. So, on to their special activity. They'd like to skirmish in one space with both French and British not selected for battle or muster, first the West Indies. Remove first a British fort, then most British cubes. Okay, well, skirmish requires a space with French regulars and British pieces, and there's only one such space, that's Boston. And they want to remove the most possible, so the second part of the skirmish procedure will come into play. Remove 2 British cubes and 1 French regular, and the cubes go to casualties. So we remove pieces alternating Tories and regulars, starting with the fewest in the space, so they'll take 1 Tory and 1 regular, and 1 French regular will go as well. The next card is de Grasse arrives with the French fleet. The Indians are first eligible. Their half of the event says balances effort in West Indies. Lower FNI 1 level. Remove 3 French regulars from West Indies to available. Well, there are no French regulars in the West Indies, so that part wouldn't do anything, but lowering FNI 1 level would. So this is an effective event, at least that far. So let's see if they're going to take this or not. The answer to all these questions is no, including the last question, because they rolled a 1. So, on to the rest of their flow chart. Support plus a d6 greater than opposition, yes. Gather would place 2 or more villages, no. D6 less than available war parties. Well, there are 5 available war parties, and they rolled a 3. So the answer is yes. So they're going to gather. Place villages where room and 3 or more war parties, 2 or more if corn planter in the space, first with the Indian leader. Well, that means Maryland, Delaware. They're going to place a village there. And since corn planters in the space, it only costs them 1 war party to do so. They had to pay a resource for that village. And there are no other places where they could place a village. So moving on to the next bullet point. Then place war parties at villages, first where enemies. Well, okay, there is a village space that has enemies. That's Pennsylvania. So they'll start by placing war parties there. They had to pay a resource for that also. Moving on to the next priority. Okay, we're still in the second bullet point. Place war parties at villages, first where enemies, then where no underground war parties. Okay, well, there's one village space with no underground war parties. That's the Northwest. So they'll place war parties there. They did not have to pay a resource for that because this is the first Indian province selected for this gather. So that one's free. There's still one war party available. So we carry on. We're still in the second bullet point. Place war parties at villages, and there are more villages they could place them at. First where enemies, then where no underground war parties, then with Indian leader, then elsewhere. Well, all right, the Indian leader, that space has already been selected for gather. All right, so the other 2 spaces with villages are Quebec and Southwest. So they will simply choose one of those randomly to place their last war party. They rolled a 2-3, which gives, Savannah, following it down, we get Quebec province. So they will spend a resource to place that final war party in Quebec. They've now maxed out the number of spaces where they can gather, which is 4. So they're going to move on to their special activity. They like the warpath. And they're not at 0 resources. They actually have 1 resource still. So they'd like to do this. And warpath requires a space with underground war parties and rebellion pieces. There's only 1 such space, and that's Pennsylvania. And there's only 1 piece there. So the first part of the procedure: activate 1 underground war party and remove 1 rebellion unit. So that's what they'll do. They'll activate 1 war party in Pennsylvania and remove that militia. The British are next eligible, and they can either take the event or a limited command. The event once again says lower FNI 1 level, remove 3 French regulars from West Indies to available. And so all that would do is lower FNI 1 level and remove that blockade from Philadelphia. And the British are not going to take it. Their last bullet point in the event or command box came into play because they do control 5 or more cities, and this event is effective. But they rolled a 3, so they're not going to take it. So they'll look for a limited command instead. British resources greater than 0, yes, they are at 11. 10 or more British regulars on map, and rebels control a city without a rebel fort. Well, this is an interesting one because I had to think about what on map meant. Because they have 6 regulars down here in the West Indies, and if you count those, well, then they do have more than 10. And the rebels do control a city without a rebel fort. If you don't count those, then the British do not have more than 10 on the map. They only have 8. So, just looking at the rule book, I mean, the very beginning of the rule book, 1.3, the map. It says the map shows the British colonies of North America and neighboring provinces dividing into various types of spaces. So, and map spaces include rural provinces, colonies in Indian Reserve, and urban cities. No mention of the West Indies. In fact, if you look over here, West Indies, 1.3.7, West Indies is a holding box. Okay, so the West Indies is not a space, right? And the map consists of all of these types of spaces, namely colonies in Indian Reserve and cities. So I don't think the West Indies counts as part of the map, which makes perfect sense because British bot here is trying to consider whether or not to play garrison, right? And they can't, pick up pieces from the West Indies and use them to garrison. So why should they count those at this point? Okay, so I think the answer here is no. Available British regulars greater than a D6. Yes, they have 10 available. So they're going to muster with their limited command. So once again, they're going to look for a neutral or passive space. Within that, first to add British control, then where Tories are the only British units, then elsewhere within each first and highest population. Well, now British bot is in kind of a weird predicament because their very first priority is neutral or passive. And remember that muster, the location for regulars, is a city that's not blockaded or an adjacent colony or the West Indies. Those are the only possible locations for placing regulars. A city not blockaded, an adjacent colony, or the West Indies. Well, once again, all these cities are at active, either opposition or support, right? Even this one, active support is hiding, but it's there. And the only colonies that aren't active are Maryland, Delaware, and Pennsylvania, but British bot can't select those right now because the only city they're adjacent to is blockaded. So that means that the only option of the possible locations that is at neutral or passive is the West Indies, because the West Indies is always neutral. So this is rather odd, but following British bot literally, they would select the West Indies here and place 6 more regulars. That seems pretty silly. Nevertheless, that's what British bot will do. Again, we're trying to play these bots as literally as possible. And so, right here, we're told, place regulars, first in neutral or passive. Well, the only place they can choose to place regulars that's neutral or passive is the West Indies. They can choose that space, and it's neutral or passive. So that's what they got to do. They got to use their limited command here to do exactly what they did last time and just put 6 more British regulars into the West Indies. A little silly, but like I said before, that's what these bots do sometimes. They do some silly things every once in a while. Well, that's quite the force in the West Indies now. Okay, and once again, they can't place any Tories there because they can never place Tories in the West Indies. And they can't place a fort there because there are no forts available, and they can't do any reward loyalty there because that space is always neutral. So that's it. That's all they can do for this limited command. The next card is Iroquois Confederacy, and the French are first eligible. We see the sword icon under their flag, so they won't take this. They'll skip it automatically. But the event on their side says Iroquois Confederacy shatters, remove 1 Indian village. The Patriots are going to be next eligible. I have a feeling they're definitely going to want that. All right, but anyway, for the French, they skip it automatically, so they'll go and look for a command or special activity. French resources are at 6, so that's greater than 0. Treaty of Alliance has been played. A D6 less than the available French regulars. There are 6 French regulars available, so they had to roll on that. They rolled a 1. So they will muster in 1 space with rebel control or the West Indies. If fewer than 4 French regulars are available and West Indies is not rebel control, muster in the West Indies. Well, there are more than 4 French regulars available, so skip that. Otherwise, muster first in a colony or city with continentals, then elsewhere. Okay, well, there are 3 possibilities. New Hampshire has some continentals, Boston has some continentals, and New Jersey has some continentals. So they'll have to choose randomly from those. The roll is a 6-2, which is Charlestown, so follow it around, and they get to Boston first. So they will muster by placing 4 regulars into Boston. They'll pay a resource for that. Correction, that costs 2 resources. And that's all the French can do with muster. It's max 1 space. Okay, so now they'll look for a special activity. They'd like to skirmish, but the problem is skirmish requires a space or the West Indies with French regulars and British pieces, and no battle or muster in the space. Well, the only space with French regulars and British pieces is Boston, but they just mustered in Boston, so they can't skirmish there. Okay, so they'll look for a different special activity. Next priority is préparer la guerre, but they won't do that either because there are not any unavailable French pieces, and French resources are not at 0. So they're going to use naval pressure. Add another blockade. First in a city selected for battle, then at most support. Okay, so they're going to blockade a city at most support, and that means all the cities except for New York, because that's at opposition, and Philadelphia, which is already blockaded. So they'll choose randomly from all the other cities. They rolled a 2-2, which gives Philadelphia, but again, Philadelphia is already blockaded, so the next city is Norfolk. All right, so F&I goes up 1 level, and the French blockade Norfolk. That brings total support down to 22. The Patriots are next eligible. They can take the event or a limited command. And as predicted, they will take this event, remove an Indian village. Definitely going to want to do that. Looking at their event or command box, the 3rd bullet point, event places a Patriot fort or removes an Indian village. Yes, it sure does. Okay, but this question doesn't give us any priorities for choosing which village. There's several to choose from. So Patriot Bot will roll randomly for the selection of which village. The roll is 1-1. because it's right at the top, Quebec City. So Quebec Province is the first place where there's actually a village. So PatriotBot will use the event to remove that village from Quebec Province. The next card up is Don Bernardo takes Pensacola. But I'm going to end this video here. You can see there are only 5 cards left that have not been seen. So we're getting very close to the end of the game. That means the next video should be the last one. And I will see you then.